You've been busy tonight?
Yeah, I've been just kind of like doing some stuff during the day. Not really too busy though. And then I was just playing a game with my friend online, and I'm probably gonna start playing a lot more. Well, not a lot more, but a little bit. It's a little game called Pocket Fighter, and it's
Pocket
like a
Fighter?
little street Pocket Rumble,
Pocket Rumble?
and it's like a little Street Fighter esque 8-bit indie game that came out recently, and it's crazy fast and it's really well made.
Nice. Let me adjust my Discord volume real quick. Oh, all right. Okay. Yeah, I'll get started here. So I'm gonna do this interview segment for political Twitch streamers,
Okay,
and I'm gonna try to make it a regular thing. The
cool.
goal is basically to get to know the streamer at more of a fundamental level because I think most of the panels and whatnot are kind of issue related. And if you think about like a value hierarchy, the issues everyone talks about are up here, and it's tough to like pin down what someone's core values are. So
Yeah, that's true.
if you want, can you introduce yourself a little bit about you, what you're into?
Yeah, sure. My name's Brent. Let me do this really quick. There we go. So my name's Brent. I'm into games, but I've been into politics since I can remember, like 12 years old at least. I remember like I was 7 when Bill Clinton got elected, and ever since then, I don't know. I've always sort of followed it. Used to listen to like talk radio when I was a kid because my parents did. But
Yeah.
and then I started following that, and I was raised Catholic, but I was never really like religious. It was never like something that I really like cared about too much. It was never like a major part of. I was really scared of going to hell, but other
Yeah.
than that, I was not like a really big fan or proponent or anything of religion. Um, but other than that, I'm into politics and play games, and um, I mean, I'm sure there's a lot more stuff than that, but I can't think of it off the top of my head at the exact moment. So
Okay. Uh,
yeah.
so when you go onto panels or you have discussions, what do you think your role is as a let's say political streamer? I mean, some people educate, some people entertain. What do you think you do?
Yeah. I try and like find the truth, and that seems like a weird thing to say, but I always try and like I always want to figure out like what's actually happening or what's really at stake or what people are actually discussing or agreeing on or disagreeing on, because a lot of the things on the panels that we talk about, people will go on and on and on, and it's like they'll just be going in circles because there's like a key disagreement about something that we really aren't clicking on, or that we're not agreeing on. And I always like to find out what that is and then go deeper and like find out why. And then so a lot of panels I get on, we always end up in like philosophy or
Yeah. Yeah.
something like that. And then a lot of people are like, fuck, why are we doing this philosophy stuff? And it's like, well, because this is where it's at. This is why we're having these kind of like discussions in the first place.
Yeah, for
So,
sure.
but a lot of people don't want to go that deep, which I don't blame them, because actually when you go that deep, um, sometimes it doesn't go anywhere. Like you can't prove it. You can't force someone to believe things, which is good. But
Well, and it's when you do go that deep, you can find out what the real disagreement is.
right, yeah, exactly, exactly. And when I don't know, I always want to. I guess I try and like to understand. I guess I always want to understand, and I want to be like understood. And have like a discussion. So plus it's fun. I just like talking about these kind of
Yeah.
ideas with people.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
it's a little
thinking.
recreation. It's kind of like recreation a little bit.
Oh yeah, same for me.
Yeah,
Probably same for a lot of people. Um,
yeah.
so based on that role of like trying to find the truth or diving deeper into a conversation, is there any like low hanging fruit or anything easy that maybe you could do better in those discussions?
Nope.
No,
Nope.
just
I'm perfect.
perfect, just spot on. You execute
I'm
without failure.
slugging hard. Yeah. Yeah, there is a lot. like, so not to get it too much, but people like they say like someone's hiding their power level or something like that because they're
Yeah.
not, being like forthcoming. I do that a lot because I don't want to like come out too strong, and I'm not like seeking conflict, you know. So so I'm very measured in how I talk to people, and sometimes I think maybe that comes off as a little bit fake, perhaps. I don't want to be fake, but I'm not trying to just give hot takes and blow out content and you know create clips. And I love debating, and I'd love to debate people, but I don't want to like debate and fight over shit that's not important or for no reason or that no one really cares about. I don't want to like pick intellectual fights and do shit like that. Like so,
Well, and that's part of having a conversation. I mean, you're not just going to yell at the person you're talking to. You have to understand that they're your audience, and you have to have a back and forth. If you're just throwing around hot takes that you can't go anywhere, then it's not really a conversation.
yeah, yeah, that's true. I guess here's one thing. This is an answer to your previous question. I like to represent a. I like to like be a voice that people don't hear, or because like I mean a lot of the people on the left, or a lot I was gonna say a lot of people on Twitch are on the left, right? And I'll like before I was on, or at least panels I'm not on, I hear people be like fucking like conservatives, or like not everybody but some people, they're like we hate them, they're trash or some shit like that, or they're the worst, or they're the problem. And it's like, all right, well, I'm kind of conservative, so let's just talk it out. Let's see, what's going on and what we're actually discussing here. And um, I like to give like a fair take. I like to listen to people, and I like to be fair, and I like to go over issues and actually figure out what's going on and what's at the bottom of it all.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So there's kind of three famous persuasive styles: pathos, ethos, and logos. And
Hmm.
if we could go through those and kind of say how you relate to those. So the first one, pathos, is kind of appealing to emotions. So like, how do you tend to connect with people?
Not. I don't know. Maybe like humor. I guess. I don't know.
Yeah,
That
yeah,
could
yeah,
be it.
for sure. Yeah,
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah. So I guess that would be it. I never try and be funny. If you try and be funny, it only comes out cringe. But
yeah. You got to be
you
your
know,
genuine self. Yeah,
yeah, you just got to say some real shit. Uh, but I'll try and understand people because I think people. Well, I really like it, and other people really like being understood, right? So I don't force it. I don't have like a flow chart or anything. But I always want to actually understand people's arguments. And it's like, here's what you think it is, and here's what you think's happening, and here's what you believe, and here's why you think that, right? And it's
yep,
like, I'm not trying to put them in a box. I'm actually trying to really get it. So I do really want to understand what people think and why they think that way. And then if I disagree, we'll we'll go into that next. But it's a it's very important that if you disagree, you at least understand what you disagree with. And I think a lot of people don't even go that far.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Because
Some do.
if you disagree without empathizing, then you're just kind of talking about some ethereal idea rather than kind of connecting with the person. Yeah, I get that.
Yeah. Well, not even necessarily empathizing, just understanding. Just like if you, if you disagree without understanding, like you might be like, well, you're wrong. 2 + 2 doesn't equal 5, but I get you think it does because of this,
yeah,
and here we are now. Like
yeah,
but
yeah.
yeah. So
And then so ethos would be stuff on a resume, credibility, or maybe stances on
oh,
ethics.
I pretty much have no authority based on ethos. Like I don't have any. Well, I mean, like I'm never gonna like hold up. Well, not never, but you know, I'm not like holding up diplomas when people are like, well, "Why do you think that?" Or "What on what authority do you say that?" It's like I don't know. I have no greater authority than anyone I'm talking to in most any subject, and unless I literally do like know what I'm talking about because I've gone through experience. Like I live in Seattle, right? So if I'm talking to somebody and they're like, "Here's what it's like in Seattle," but they don't live here, I'm not going to take them that seriously. So unless like it's like derived life experience and I'm like literally here telling you that this is the way it is because I'm here now, and I can tell you that. Um, Otherwise, I don't really appeal to ethos in that sense. I mean, ethos sounds like ethics, right?
Yeah, yeah. That it's more of like authority, or if maybe if someone is like if someone is a good person and they can show it in their actions, then they can be looked up to, and then you know it's a reason to look up to a person
Sure.
for that.
Yeah. Well, I'm not the Pope, so I'm not worried about that. Like,
And then logos, logic, reason,
that's
data.
pretty much it's pretty much what I try and go for. Yeah, if anything, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Because it should never really fall apart. If it's based on something sound.
Oh,
I
sorry.
think.
One sec. Sorry.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Hey, sorry.
yeah. No problem, dude.
So this, I think we kind of mentioned this the other day, but how well do you trust the Twitch audience and other Twitch streamers?
Trust them.
Yeah. So there's an aspect of trust that is the um, can I say anything and not get misconstrued, or trust that the words that I say won't radicalize somebody.
Oh, I trust them about as much as I trust any random screen name on the internet.
Yeah,
Uh, that's it. That's the truth, man. I mean, it's not like anyone who I'm talking to or I'm engaging in conversation with, I always give them uh, the kind of respect that I would want them to give me,
mm,
and just like, hey, we're talking, and the fact that we're discussing something means that you want to like engage, and so then we'll engage, right? Chat is chat. Everyone knows what chat is. Chat is everyone. So you can't give them any more or less. There's people in chat like who will call you. I can't remember. We were talking about. I've had people in my chat on my stream and on other streams, and you'll say some shit, and then they'll blow it out of proportion, and they'll say
yeah,
like, "Well, you're fucking crazy," or "You're sliding into the alt right," or something, and it's just like, yeah, whatever, okay, and sometimes those are just people trolling or having a bad day or something. So yeah, chat is chat. People who I engage with personally on a consistent basis, I just see them as like friends and other like fellow streamers, and that means that I respect them and I'm interested in talking to them. There's some people who, if you see them like over and over again, kind of like contradicting themselves, then you're kind of like, well, okay, I'll sort of maybe listen to the things you say. I will listen to the things you say, but I will understand that you might say something different later.
yeah, yeah.
So I'll remember that,
Right.
you
Yeah,
know,
it's
but
tough to
we'll
keep
see.
track.
Yeah. Well, you kind of like, you keep track when someone says something and you go, ugh, like, why'd you say that? And then you kind of remember that and you're like, oh, fuck, whatever. Um, yeah. And then, yeah, otherwise that's about it. I mean, dealing with Twitch and being like you when you put your face and your voice on Twitch, you become kind of like a personality. You sort of step out of the chat box a little bit. It sticks around, and there's some stakes to things you say. When I have conversations with people, um, just on voice, then I trust them and I respect them, as much as any people. But when you're looking at somebody face to face, it really does change it. It really does matter. It changes how you see them and how you hear their words too. I think because it adds like some import to it. It adds some like gravity, and it matters because they're putting their identity behind their words in a real way. That it's like, I'm not going to look you up, like dox anybody to find out who you are because you said something, and like no one's like that. But it's like if it's you and you're talking to me and I see you, that's real. That's very real, and it's personal.
Yeah, yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
So going a little deeper now, where would you say what do you think the values are that motivate you day to day, or what are some values that you hold in your own life?
That I hold in my own life.
Yeah,
Oh man, so it's like more than just Twitch, like what I'm doing with like my life. I want to
yeah,
know, yeah. I want to understand things and I want to know like the truth and I want to know like what's real. That's like one of the main things that motivates me. Um, During like after the 2016 election and even now, how like and leading up to it and all that, there's all this conflict, right? And people like couldn't even have conversations and couldn't even like trust each other, right? Like it just felt very hard to talk to people. And I would, living in Seattle and being a little more conservative, I would hear people say things and I would want to disagree with them, but it was to them, it was just sort of like to be stated and understood, and everyone says it and no one will object, and that's fine. They don't really think that. They just think it's really true, right?
Hmm.
And so it was just like, oh no, like there's like this barrier to understanding um, that was very hard to cross with people, and probably for me too in some instances. I'm sure maybe some people maybe feel like I'm hard to discuss things with sometimes too. Um, but so then I thought like, okay, well, so what people need is we need like a touchstone so that when we disagree with things, even important things, we can always go back to like our main thing, like the one thing that we all share and that we all understand to be true. So when we disagree over here, but we know that we're in agreement over here, we'll know that at some point between the point where we agree and where we disagree, like we lost something like split, right? And so we can like trace it back. And then I was like, okay, so what will that be? Like, what would that thing be? And it would have to be something that everyone could agree on, that would never really change and always kind of be the same, like so that it's not going to be this way today and then different tomorrow or a year or ever really. So it would have to be something that never really changed, that we'd always understood. And then I kind of realized, and this is where it got weird, is I kind of realized that like if there's something that's always true and it never changes and it's the same for everyone and everyone knows it and recognizes it, we would probably treat that like God. Like that would be the thing that everyone trusted. It would be the center of trust for everyone everywhere. And then it was like, oh, okay, I think there's like a lack of God in like the world, but that doesn't mean that like there's a lack of like the Bible, there's a lack of like religion or something. It means that there's like a lack of universal trust that we all understood we share in, right? So you have to find the thing that everyone shares and that's always the same, so that we can always understand that we're like that we're all connected, I suppose.
Yeah, yeah. So you
Yeah.
you're answering my next two questions totally.
Cool.
Yeah, basically you could say something like everyone on the ship wants that ship to succeed, and
Yes.
you could say that that ship getting to its destination, just to make a metaphor, like that would be aiming toward God, or aiming toward heaven or something like that, or you could use spiritual language to say the same thing. Yeah,
Yeah.
I'd kind of agree that maybe you know, the U.S. has been around for 250 years, and maybe as a country, that God was, I don't know, the Constitution or the Declaration of Independence or the Bill of Rights or something like that, and
Hmm.
I think that can be the case, that a lot of people aren't on that ship, or maybe they're on the ship and they say our destination is wrong, and it's not about should we
Yeah.
change the engine, it's not about who's going to shovel coal, it's about, hey, we're going the wrong direction,
Right.
just like where are we going completely. So that's a really foundational thing. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah. So, and I've kind of like learned. I'm learning, and I'm like taking courses on how to like understand people and like find truth and stuff. And it's like one of the tenets is like the thing that unites people is a common purpose. So you have to have a common purpose with people,
Yep.
because when you have a common purpose, all other differences are like superficial, right? Superficial differences don't matter as long as you're all united towards working towards a common goal. But if you don't have a common goal, superficial differences become magnified, or goals in themselves, and then everyone has different goals, and then people are in conflict.
Yeah, and then it's
So you have to be able to work
shouting
together.
matches, and yeah.
Yeah, then it becomes a matter of authority or a matter of power, and then people start breaking apart essentially.
I
Yeah.
Yeah, so Uh, again, I like your answer because it kind of jumbled all my next questions together. But maybe to put a bow
Cool.
on it, so how could you say that maybe your values match the current values of the country, or that you see expressed in the country?
Well, I think that the core tenet and the core value of America is free speech.
Mm,
And like that is the bedrock. That is like why the First Amendment is the First Amendment, right? And it's a very cool thing, and I thought it was very great. Like I was very like kind of happy when I realized it and I understood it. Is that the the First Amendment doesn't give you rights. Your rights are inherent. The First
yep.
Amendment is actually a chain on the government
Yeah.
that it restricts government. It doesn't give you anything. And it says the government shall not infringe upon these rights that are given you by God, as it's, or endowed by your creator, right? So it's understood that these are like your inherent attributes or values or something that can't be taken from you because they're intrinsic to what you are, and they're protected and therefore enshrined, right?
Yep.
And so ultimately, I think free speech is the bedrock of freedom.
Mm,
And I think freedom is the American value. Now a lot of people would jump in if we were on a panel or something, like me, 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 and they would not be wrong necessarily that there's like a huge amount of contradictions and imperialism and all sorts of and like history of slavery and all sorts of things, right? But it's like even though we're not perfect within this, we still have like this understanding that like you're a free person, and though even if those get violated, they're still intrinsic. You can violate what's there, right? But then you can look to justice maybe to restore it. But it's like freedom, which is freedom of thought, really, is like your core value. No one is above you to tell you what you have a right to think or not think, because then they're telling you that they have a right to think and not think things that you're restricted from. It's not kind of like knowledge or secrets like the CIA is keeping things. It's like someone telling you that like I've learned this and I understand it. And now that I've learned it and I understand it, I have the right to tell you that you can't because I'm superior and
right.
you are inferior. It's like, no,
Yeah.
no, you don't.
Yeah.
You can't do
That's
that.
dangerous territory.
It's
Yeah.
insanely dangerous. And, if someone thinks that, they think less of you and they think that they rule you,
Yeah.
essentially.
Well,
Yeah.
and
And,
that there's no humility in that thought. Like,
correct.
if someone who thinks that way, don't they understand that? Let's say they think that way about you, but what if there's someone who thinks that way about them? I mean, would they
Right.
accept being dictated to?
Never, never. They would say they would, but they would not.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
And yeah, and the other thing is here's the weird one is it was just another part of it. Like, okay, if they can know something, right? But you can't. What that ultimately means is that they're afraid of you because if you knew it, they would like the only reason anyone would know something and not tell you is because they're afraid that you would know it. Or they're afraid like now maybe in a
Yeah.
personal relationship, maybe they're afraid that they would hurt you or something, but we're talking about more general knowledge, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I'm going to learn something, but you can't. Why? Well, because you must think that it would hurt you in some way, or that it would be damaging, right? So, so there's an element of fear in there that creates this idea of inequality that someone thinks that they can tell you these types of things, and I don't accept that.
Yeah. That really changed the way I was thinking. Like when I was growing up, I don't, I'm sure I was taught it, but I never really absorbed it. That you need to respect each person as an individual, and that
Yes,
individual has their own, what you would call sovereignty,
yes,
or rights, and those rights aren't given by the government. The
yes,
person has rights in and of themselves, and the government can kind of specify, uh, out of all of the rights, here are the few things that the government can, you can say, infringe on, and then we have the special few that can't get touched. And
yes,
to add on what you said, the First Amendment being the the First Amendment, freedom of speech
yeah,
being first, is that that's the mechanism to make change. Like, even if
yes,
if there's some topic that's considered taboo, but it needs to be addressed. It can't get addressed unless you have freedom of speech. And then
Right.
on top of that, everyone thinks that the point of freedom of speech is for dangerous ideas. And if you think freedom of speech is about which football team is going to win the Super Bowl, like you don't understand what that right is. So
Right. 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 Yeah. Exactly. And I mean, I was thinking something else that I was going to respond to you with, but now it's just I kind of moved on to a thought, and now that one's kind of gone too. I don't know. Fuck.
well, I've got
We're gonna say you were just talking about rights, and it's this to return to the Constitution. There's, it's not like the Constitution enshrines it. I feel like the Constitution enshrines it, but I also feel like it recognizes it is that all men or all people are created equal with these certain inalienable rights, and so no one has rights that you don't, and so your rights are understandings of your inherent equalities with other people.
yeah, yeah. Wow, I've never heard it said that way. I like that.
Yes. And
Eh,
so, when you defend your rights or you enshrine your rights and things like that, then like you're understanding like this is what all people share together. This is part of what defines like a human being or what it is to be alive. And that's
yeah,
why I'm very protective and kind of I get a little combative sometimes when people say like healthcare is a human right. And I will say like,
yeah,
you know what, like I don't think it's a human right because it can't exist outside of like medical knowledge that's been gained, right? Or like someone there to do it for you. So like what someone else must like provide you is not inherently a human right. But you could maybe say it's a civil right. And I think I'd say a civil right because a civil right is a right within a civilization.
mm,
And like within a democratic civilization, you'd say like, well, you have a right to vote. You have a right to equal representation. That would be a civil right because it's within a civilization and it can only exist within that. And in the same way, I think healthcare could be considered, I don't know necessarily I'm doing this, that might be a thing, but it could be considered like a civil right potentially. But I don't believe it's inherently a human right. Um,
yeah. And that kind of
yeah,
makes me think like when doctors were using leeches and heroin or whatever, was it still a right then? So a right isn't a right depending on where we are in history.
you're right. Yeah, that's true. Yeah. Well, yeah, you're right. You're right. And it's like, and people will say like, well, then what about like when people were like in cave, like in cavemen or during wars or the Dark Ages and stuff. And it's like, well, I think our understanding of human rights evolves,
Hmm.
but ultimately the rights themselves are something that we understand to be intrinsic. So we can learn necessarily, but I don't think we create them out of thin air. So
And
yeah.
let me piggyback. So we've been talking about values quite a bit, and it seems like, well, there's probably more than this, but I'll boil it down to these two. It seems like a lot of values either come from like empirics and data, or some sort of spirituality, or like what you think a human is and or what a human deserves, or something like that. So how would
Mhm.
you say that these two things have an impact on your values or views?
Uh, empiricism and data versus spirituality.
Yeah, I mean, not necessarily one or the other, but like
Yeah,
how do
yeah.
they impact your views?
Well, I mean, empiricism and data is like powerful and important, for understanding things that are outside of like the scope of my experience.
Hmm.
When it really gets down, and so it can certainly be flawed or misconstructed, but it can also be very accurate and representational. But when it comes down to things like people will be like, where do human rights come from and things like that, then you get into this realm where I'm losing my words here, but at a certain point you have to accept that something exists. I don't know. And that's sort of where like it kind of gets into spirituality. Like some people don't believe in free will, and I've been getting called a free willer um,
As a
recently, and
put
that's
down,
fine.
I don't know. Like,
Dude, that's the weirdest thing that someone says that. It's like without free will, and this is using very like serious language, and a lot of people maybe not would maybe wouldn't like it, but like without freedom of will, without freedom, maybe I think you'd be a slave, right? Like
right, or
without
like
the ability to be self-determined meaning your will, like then that would be slavery because you'd be subject to something outside of yourself, a force outside of your own, like determination. And like there people will call me a free willer or laugh at free will because they're determinists because they think that the world is
Right.
like a billiard cues and like the Big Bang like hit it and then all the balls went everywhere and now they're just going to keep going until they all stop, right?
Yeah.
And so therefore they think free will and choice is an illusion, which is a powerful argument. But then at the same time, the thing is like no one acts that way. Bastiat is probably the most straightforward and honest person I've heard who fancies himself or declares himself a determinist because he's like, yeah, I understand intellectually and logically that the world appears from my like point of view to be deterministic, but you can't live that way. No one can live in the world that way.
Right.
You don't live that way, and no one treats each other that way, and no one likes being treated that way. And it's like so the reality that we all live and experience is not that,
Yeah.
And so and it's just like if someone said like well to go to really hyperbole they were like I'm not a murderer and then they go out and they murder a bunch of people and it's like well they said they're not a murderer and it's like yeah but their actions show that they are and so to not equate these too much but it's like if you say you don't believe in free will but then you pretty much make choices in your life and you would never let someone subject you to slavery or something like you behave
Right.
freely.
Right.
Everyone does.
Yeah.
And that's the kind of thing where it's like, well, now what are we going to do? How are you going to decide how you live in the world and how the world functions? Are you going to rely on your perception and your data that tells you, like within your limited understanding of the universe, that free will is impossible because of physics? Or are you going to like, I don't know, trust experience and recognize it? It feels like it's a mental stop or something like that, or a mental dead end that people maybe will sit in to say like, oh yeah, there is no choice, there is no free will, but they can't behave that way, and so then I don't really believe they believe it.
Yeah.
They tell themselves they do, but maybe they don't. I don't know.
Yeah. I'm gonna have to. I don't know. I don't know if we'll ever figure that out, but I'm gonna have to like sit on that sometime for an hour straight and kind of figure out how those two things can align. But so
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Oh, but that was sorry, not to cut you off, but that was my answer to your question about spirituality because
yeah.
people do recognize, and I've talked to them, that's like if you want to step outside of the physical determinist, like the physical determinism, you have to recognize essentially spirit, which would be like the function of something outside of like the billiard ball cues of the universe, right? Like a focal point of choice that's separate from outside forces, a point of change within yourself, right?
Yeah.
Where you can make decisions.
Yeah. I could like to go off of that. I mean, you think about. I mean, so I have a master's in economics, and often we just run these huge regressions with tons of variables, and you find out. So kind of like maybe what are the odds of this person who grew up in this zip code? Like, what is their when they grow up? What's their income going to be? Their salary, and like you find out that people they have all of the variables working against them and they still bucket and do well, and then there's other people who have everything working for them and they don't do well. So there's something going on that we'll never understand. I mean, until I mean, I always say this, I don't think we will never map out every single atom in the universe, and no one on earth it'll never be the case where everyone on earth has a 200 IQ, all the atoms in the universe are mapped out, and then we'll just be able to rewind time or fast forward and know what's going to happen in the future. That'll never happen. So
Sure.
you
Yeah.
can't just you can't live with that.
Right, right. Well, yeah, you're right. Well, think about this: like a perfect model of the universe that like perfectly modeled the universe would be a universe. Get it?
Yeah.
Like you
Yeah.
can't perfectly model the universe without it actually literally being a universe within itself.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
so it's
Yeah.
not you're not going to make a universe in a universe that's a mirror of the universe to figure out the universe and then look at it and then look at this one. It like doesn't make sense.
Yeah. Yeah. Yes.
So
So there's this kind of idea I've been toying with is that so like when you make an economic model or just a prediction, let's say predicting who's going to win the next election, you could say You put in all the variables and like what everyone's talking about, and then you get 90% chance that this person's going to win. And if you broadcast that 90% chance, that could people could take that 90% chance and say, oh, if that person's going to win, I'm going to vote against that, and your prediction could make that change. So what if you put that
Right.
prediction to the input of the model? And then what's going to happen if it's just the case that people vote against what the prediction is, then the model will eventually just hit 50%. So that's saying that maybe there's meta models, or maybe it's just impossible to use that prediction, or to use that deterministic prediction to know the future, or if anyone ever would, it would automatically just be, it'd be removed because that information
Sure.
is used as an input.
Right. Well, I mean, you're talking about the Heisenberg uncertainty principle, right? And that's where, that is like, I don't know if you
I
watch
know.
Breaking Bad, a lot of people know Heisenberg, but essentially like you can't measure something without affecting it, because to measure it is to basically like bounce some node of information, whether it's like a photon or light off of it, right? Like it's within
Oh, it's the
particles, right?
like the double slit experiment that.
It's it is not that. It is not that. That is a very
Oh,
cool experiment, though. I don't know if they know that one, but this is basically it's like within a particle, right? You can't measure its position and its speed at the same time, because to measure it, you have to interact with it, and as you interact with it, you change it.
okay.
So
Yeah, yeah,
you can never like perfectly measure or model things without interacting with them, and by interacting with them, you're affecting them.
yeah, yeah. Totally.
So it's
Exactly.
impossible.
Yeah.
It's impossible to observe and not be a part of something and then know it like perfectly and separately.
I'm I'm gonna try really hard to remember that. I like that. I might use that from time to time.
Yeah, it's a very interesting insight. The
Um,
double slit thing is cool. I don't know how that one works. I don't know if anyone knows exactly how that works. I think it's quite the mystery.
well, yeah, I I looked it up, and it's like you almost don't believe it. Like, you mean when you measure it, it's different than what it actually is. It's one of those things that it just seems
Yeah.
like it I don't know. It's impossible to
Do
understand.
you know about quantum entanglement?
That everything's a probability, and one thing can
Uh,
exist in three different states at one time.
I don't know. It might have something to do with that, but that's not what I was referencing. It's that that like if you split a particle, like a very low particle, very small particle, like it will send out two separate like, and I don't know how anyone could possibly measure this or know this, but it'll send out like the two parts that like made it will go in different directions, right? But no information can travel in the universe faster than the speed of light. So, if something's on over here and then something's over here, it can be near instantaneous, but it can't go faster than the speed of light. But if you break these particles apart and they're spinning particles, and you change the spin on this one, the one over here will immediately, before faster than the speed of light, adjust and like mirror the spin. So there's actual information, as far as we can tell, at one point in the universe being changed and being perfectly mirrored on another point in the universe faster than we understand information to be able to travel. And so that means that it means that they're actually connected, even
That
though in our minds and in our perception we've broken them apart and they're being acted on separately, but we don't understand how that is.
Yeah, that's you're talking about magic right now. I don't know.
It's pretty sick.
Yeah.
It's very cool. It's very cool. Yeah,
All right.
very cool stuff.
So I'm gonna get into a little bit of cynicism here.
Cool.
This question is kind of meant like, uh, basically, I'm not sure if you have kids, but if you do have kids, or if you will, what
I don't.
value?
I want to.
Okay. What values are you going to pass down to them? And the point of this question is to kind of say, um, what do you actually hold, but what do you think you should hold?
Sure, good, because I don't actually stick to my own values as much as I'd like to. Some of my well, that's not true. I have values, but I do fall short of my own standards at times. Um, but I'm learning to be more honest, because I'm very passive sometimes, and so I will just go with the flow or not tell people things because it's easier, and that creates way more problems than anything. And ultimately, it's a result of like fear or cowardice, right? So I think as I work on it, I would probably want to impart to my kids that facing up to things, or at least being honest is always the best way for you and for other people. I'm trying to learn that myself too. It's probably why I'm on Twitch, actually,
Mm,
is to speak to people about these kinds of things, and tell people like what I think and learn to like be more honest and communicate with them. And it's kind of like I was saying earlier when I said, like hide your power level kind of thing, but ultimately, not necessarily come full full forth out of the gate.
mm,
But I'm learning to be more like that, I suppose, and be a little more open,
yeah,
less reserved, and tell people actually what I think. So
yeah. It's better to be balanced than on one of the extremes. Yeah,
yeah, yeah, that's true.
but
Definitely, I think an honest extreme is better than a deceitful extreme, though.
yeah. I would think so. Yeah,
So it tilts one way over another. All my favorite people, even if they're total assholes, as long as they're honest, I still love them.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
That is that is really interesting. Like even when people say, I don't know, like I'll watch a YouTube video and someone just has the craziest takes or craziest ideas. I just yeah, I appreciate that they're throwing it out there and even they're willing to stand by it and have a
yeah,
discussion about it. Yeah.
yeah,
Well, let
yeah.
me. So I've got one last thing here, and it is
Sure.
more policy focused. So I'm kind of thinking what out of the whole things that you know, big changes that we could make as a country. Um,
Hmm.
what's maybe the top one that you would say that you would most advocate for, and just want to know if you could give the other side to that, and what you would refute the other side with.
Policy changes. I don't have any really great big policy changes. Like, there's nothing necessarily majorly political that I'm like, the U.S. has to start doing this. I do like uh, a reduction in like foreign wars and militarism. I'd
Hmm.
say like I think that's huge. And then on the other side of that, I really want environmentalism is something I care a lot about too. Uh, Cutting down pollution, taking better care of like the oceans and trees and animals and things like that. I generally care a lot about that because I think a lot of that is far more valuable than most of the things that we sacrifice them for. So understanding like what's really valuable and what's worth keeping and what's worth not focusing on, I think is very important. So I don't know. I would say a greater focus on environmentalism, and obviously that usually comes between like a balance or a sacrifice between environmentalism or economics,
Mm.
which is very sad. Um, but those are two of the major things. Otherwise, as far as like what I'm mostly concerned on is culture and people understanding things, kind of like what we've been talking about, like the value of free speech, and that like free speech is like this inherent way to, I don't know, make life worth living, but also like I think it is the one of the main reasons behind why the U.S. is the U.S.
Yeah,
Because a
yeah,
lot of people, I've talked to a lot of people on Twitch, and I've talked to some people, and they'll be like, the U.S. is successful because it's a fluke. Like they'd be like, it's a fluke, or we got lucky, we came out of World War II, and they're the same people who shit on the U.S. at every fucking turn,
right,
because
right, yeah.
then they're really awesome or something. Anyway,
Well, let me go off
it's
that
just
for a second.
it's so
Like,
performative. But go ahead.
if you so you did talk about free will, and then you talk about the determinist idea. So I think it's possible that people, yeah, if it's true that maybe more left wingers are determinists, that would kind of make sense. Like if everyone, if every individual person is just a cog in a machine, like they are, they're the same as a rock, they're just made up of matter, then
Hmm.
then you know they can be governed like a machine. Like we can kind of
Right.
control what people learn, and then we can just you know pick these outcomes and force people to fit into what those outcomes are going to be.
Correct. That's what a lot of people believe. Not all, but many, but some. And that's actually a driving force behind some of those types of like policies or ideas that you'll hear some people say.
Yeah, yeah. Well,
Yeah.
let me go off of the um, just for example the military example. I don't know. We're in
Sure.
8 wars right now, and a lot of people say we shouldn't. So what what arguments have you heard for U.S. intervention abroad in the Middle East or wherever. What good arguments have you heard for us being there?
Moral obligation, stability, defense. That better to fight them here or better to fight them there than here. That like the countries or the people that are ruling them are brutal dictators and they're hurting their people, and so therefore we have a moral obligation to go over and like depose them, and those types of things. And I suppose those are all valid reasons in some sense, but I'm not sure if they're necessarily worth it or justified. And sort of like the harm that we cause and the how it's like a detriment to us and our country, and I'm not really sure that it's going to ultimately have the effect that we want it to. You know?
Yeah. So that's what you would say back to someone who would make those arguments?
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah,
Yeah.
but again, I'm not a total expert on it. I'm more just a guy who kind of doesn't who recognizes that wars are incredibly destructive and expensive, and you know, like the fewer the better. So
Yeah, I'm
yeah.
with you there. Maybe that's a good place to end this. If you
Maybe,
want,
yeah, we could go on a little longer, but yeah, it's fun.
well,
Um,
that's all the questions that I have here. But yeah,
oh,
are
okay.
there any other topics you wanted to touch?
Well, I just had one more point on free speech. And what was it? Oh, it was that we were talking about like the U.S. and its value and we're successful, and then I think free speech is ultimately the reason, because I don't think there's anything more powerful than ideas or thought, right?
Hmm.
And we have enshrined both in our culture but also in our government of the idea of the freedom of thought or the freedom of ideas, and so therefore like free power, free movement and exchange of the most powerful thing that human beings have to affect change and establish, um, the good things that we want for ourselves and others. And it's like we have the first thing is ideas, free ideas, and the second thing is guns.
Hmm. Right.
And
Yeah.
it's like, yeah, and the truth
You got
is
to
an
enforce it.
idea.
Yeah.
The truth is an idea is far more powerful than a gun,
Yeah.
because you can't kill it,
Yep.
and it's then it comes down to there's we before we open up a different can of worms, but some people would say like they're against hate speech or they want to have hate speech laws and things like that, and that comes down to who's the authority who determines what's hateful and not, and that's why we don't have those types of things. um
Well, and think about how easily that could be used against a minority population or people without power. Like
oh, immediately.
yeah. I mean, to think
Yeah,
about if like if you make hate speech laws a thing, then that's going to say anyone who has just heterodox dialogue about even a majority population. I mean, they won't be able to express those
sure.
opinions.
Yeah, that's true. And I mean, yeah, and it would immediately be used to curtail speech that people did not like, and they would just declare it, and then they would abuse it, and it would just go to hell, and it would turn into a giant fight. But one of the major things, and to kind of maybe link this back to everything we just said, is that there's sort of like in the enshrining of free speech and in upholding that as a value and sort of like believing in it, there's this inherent faith behind it that truth wins out. That like over time, everyone speaks freely and everyone is able to share ideas and thoughts freely. Like the truth is what stays,
Hmm.
and lies are lies because they're inherently untrue, and therefore they prove themselves out as false, you know.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
so in the marketplace of ideas or the battleground of ideas or whatever, right, lies are inherently false and therefore unsubstantial. They're of no substance, but the truth is of substance. So in a completely freely speaking and free thought exchange, the truth remains, right?
yeah, yeah, yeah.
But if you don't believe in truth, or if you don't believe that's the case, then you think lies are equal to the truth, or that there is no truth, and therefore thought has to be restricted in order to enshrine safety or protection. And so there's an inherent belief in truth and its like substantial nature that fuels like the faith in free speech.
And you're not using the word truth as fact, right?
No, no, because if well, you can use them interchangeably. A fact is sort of like a concept of like an idea that is like related to truth or a true idea, right?
Hmm.
or like or it's like knowledge or something like that. Truth is sort of what I mean is like it's sort of like you can say 2 plus 2 equals 5 or 2 plus 2 equals 6, whatever, and you can go on and you can say it forever, right? But the people that understand and know and say and trust in and exchange the idea that 2 plus 2 equals 4 and 1 plus 1 equals 2, right? That's true. It's functional. It's
Yeah, it's
real.
useful.
It
Yeah,
doesn't.
yeah.
It doesn't matter how long people go on, or what they say, or how much they misteach math or the relationships, because the relationship of one and two and two and four and on and on is true, and therefore you cannot undo it. Like it cannot be negated.
Well, I think you can kind of tell me if this is wrong. I think that you can apply that to ideas. Like I think that you can
Yeah,
look at a library and say, what is the canon? Like what is the what are the historic books that have been around for hundreds or thousands of years that you read today, and and the characters resonate with you and their struggles resonate with you. You can say you know this character is just as real as my neighbor being a hero raising his kids or something like that.
right. Because they embody the same kind of like concepts or values or practices or something, right? There's something that's shared and inherent in that.
Yeah, so I think when I asked about the word true, I would say, I would say maybe the Iliad and the Odyssey is just as true as 2 plus 2 equals 4, and maybe that's a little
I know what
wrong,
you mean.
but I
I know
mean
what you
it's
mean.
there's something human about you that it's useful to be able to understand a struggle or know what it is to go
Yeah,
through hardship, and that's just as useful as division or something.
yeah. No, I know what you mean. Yeah, it's a different kind of concept or ethos or something, or maybe different kind of truth. But yeah, I know what you're saying. Jordan Peterson says things like this a lot. Actually, he speaks to this. He says, the stories that we tell over and over again, they contain a truth, even though the elements in themselves are not true. Like the messages they convey are like a meta truth that's carried over through all different stories.
Yeah, yeah, which this keeps going back to the determinist versus free will kind of thought, because if it is the case that everything's determinist, uh, why would we even care about stories? E-
Right,
everything would just kind of be, I don't know, controlled, and you can say, well, if you learn this and you learn this and you learn this, then your life will end up this way. So like there is something inhuman about thinking deterministically.
right. There would be no need to act. Period. To even take an action would be a contradiction,
Yeah.
right? It would
Yeah.
be pointless. And that's why ultimately when people say that, they can kind of go off on themselves, but it doesn't, I don't really think it changes anything. I don't really think it ultimately means anything. So
Well, Brent, don't let me keep you. I think this is a good place to end. I this
cool,
this
man.
has been a really good conversation.
Yeah, it's been
Um,
great, dude.
I,
Thanks for calling me and thanks for asking.
yeah. Well, I appreciate it. You have a good night.
Yeah, dude. Cool. I might do a panel at some point in the future. I don't know. It seems like a good service to Twitch to offer panels. Everyone wants to be on panels and talk to each other. So maybe I'll put one together. I don't want to make people like favorites or anything like that, but you're definitely invited if I do.
Oh, I'd be happy to join.
Cool, man.
I
All
appreciate it.
right, and see you later, chat.
Have a good one.
All right, see you.